ABC News presents Earth Day. An SOS for survival. Here in New York is Frank Reynolds.
Good evening. On this Earth Day, millions of Americans in the communities which dot this map have taken the first step to survival. But if this day of teach-ins, mock funerals, rallies, marches, speeches, and songs does not convince enough of us that the threat to our life on Earth is clear and present, then we may have cast a vote for death. That's the symbolism in this ecology flag. The term ecology confirms again that the Greeks had a word for everything. The Greek word oikos means house. Ecology is the study of our earthly house, our environment. This ecology flag contains the Greek letter theta, once used as a vote for death in judging one man's fate. At stake now is every man's fate, whether his air will be pure, symbolized by the white stripes, whether his land will be unspoiled, symbolized by the green stripes. Everything that makes our living better also threatens our life. Jet planes that move us quickly assault our ears, help pollute our air, and when big enough, may affect our cloud cover and our climate. Earth Day in Boston was not altogether tranquil, as demonstrators focused on Logan Airport.
The demonstration itself was completely peaceful. Fewer than 100 young people, having attended a rally in Boston, came to Logan Airport to protest development of the SST, the supersonic transport. Trans World Airlines, the target of the demonstrators, has put in preliminary orders for the aircraft, which the protesters claim will be a death-producing vehicle. Their concern is not with the safety of the plane itself, but with the sonic boom it will create, with the air pollution it will produce, and with the threat they say it will propose to the climate by dispersing tons of water vapor in the stratosphere. Some of the young people were lying in the symbolic coffins they brought to the terminal when, after half an hour, the airport authority and the state police decided enough was enough. On the contention that a public hallway was being blocked, the police ordered the demonstrators to disperse or be arrested. After the warning was repeated several times, the demonstrators began to leave, but apparently not quickly enough to satisfy the state policemen. Heated words were exchanged. Then shoving began, and arrests were made, a number of them under violent circumstances. The tumultuous nature of the arrests seemed to take the demonstrators by surprise. They had given no evidence of wanting anything other than a peaceful demonstration as their participation in Earth Day. But that's not the way it ended. 12 were taken into custody. The others dispersed, evidently unsatisfied with the outcome of their role in today's Earth Day activities.
Many people in Boston, in all big cities, think of places like Albuquerque, New Mexico, as a good place to escape from foul air, polluted water, and slums. But even Albuquerque on this Earth Day sent an SOS for survival. The air in the shanty slums, the barrios, is not yet as deadly as it is in our cities, but there is water pollution in Albuquerque, and some citizens who live near a sewage disposal plant use this day to show their concern.
This is Earth Day Albuquerque style. 200 young Mexican Americans, Chicanos, marching through the ghetto. They're protesting more than just the smell of a sewage plant. They're protesting life in the ghetto, the pollution of the inner city. The old can't help. Some say the white establishment doesn't care, so many believe cleaning the Chicano community is up to the young. The ghetto in Albuquerque is polluting the city. In some homes, there are no sewers, only open ditches that empty into canals of the Rio Grande. And some homes are still using outhouses. Next to the ghetto, there's a sewage plant that doesn't work too well. The city of Albuquerque has tried to improve conditions here, but replacing the old plant would take more than $6 million. So, in the largest city in New Mexico, this is what the protest is all about. The ghetto, the unpaved streets, the ramshackle homes, the stench of the nearby sewage plant. Many of the young people here believe they can save the earth if they start by saving a little bit of Albuquerque first.
Ecology is a non-controversial issue. No one is against survival. Earth Day began as the idea of one United States senator. Now some Democrats and some Republicans are maneuvering to make the environment issue their party's private possession. The nation's capital is as polluted as any other big city. This time of year, when the cherry blossoms delicately frame the Potomac River, the frustrating irony of our lifestyle is clearly revealed. The trees are pink and beautiful. The river is brown and ugly, and it smells.
It was as if Washington knew it was a special event and turned on spring's brightest sun for the celebration of Earth Day and a march on the Interior Department. Interior Secretary Walter Hickel was away making an Earth Day speech in Alaska, and no other administration official in Washington took formal notice of their demonstration. Following a green and white mock-up of the American flag to the Washington Monument grounds, the 2,000 original marchers had swelled to perhaps 10,000 or more by nightfall. It's about as close as Woodstock, New York, probably will ever get to the District of Columbia. Obviously, of all the environmental plagues they were protesting today, the least of these was noise pollution. It's Earth Night now at the Washington Monument. The protest leaders say it won't stop here because the air, the sky, and the water will continue to get dirtier and dirtier.
Action to clean things up may have begun in Washington on this Earth Day. A House Commerce Subcommittee approved a bill that would set national standards for our air and would regulate what comes out of chimneys, cars, and plane exhausts. The ecology hawks believe death is about to descend on our Earth and all of us. For those who feel we are not quite that close to catastrophe, there is nevertheless the judgment that we are rapidly killing much of our good Earth. In Miami, nature's bounty of white sand, tropical sun, and blue water is the reason that city exists. That environment is what made next-door Miami Beach sprout from the sand. The goal of Florida's Gold Coast has been to keep itself clean and appealing. Now some young people in Miami are sounding a warning.
The kids called their pageant the Dead Orange Parade. It was an obvious parody of the Orange Bowl Festival, which annually celebrates nature's gifts to Florida. In floats, displays, and words, marchers expressed concern that Florida's natural gifts have already been ravaged by pollution.
I want my children and my grandchildren and myself to grow up in a clean and healthy environment. I want to be able to swim in a beach, and I want to be able to come outside and breathe fresh air. And I think Dade County and Miami Beach stinks, and I want to try to improve it.
The prize for the most polluted float went to this display, featuring the Statue of Liberty in an anti-pollution mask. An outdoor rally climaxed the parade, and here spectators sampled the rock band's brand of noise pollution. And then came the crowning of this year's Miss Dead Orange Queen.
It is in the big city that our sins against our environment are most obvious. In New York City, there are too many automobiles, there are too many people, and there is too much noise. The mayor of this big city says people are the real polluters. On this Earth Day, he tried to convince the people that life can be beautiful in the big city, that New York can be a nice place to live in as well as to visit. This was Manhattan's famed Fifth Avenue this morning, choked with carbon monoxide fumes from cars, buses, and taxis. At noon, by executive order of Mayor John Lindsay, Fifth Avenue became a vast sidewalk as thousands left their offices to enjoy the sunny weather on Earth Day. Ironically, the Air Resources Administration would later report that air pollution rose to unsatisfactorily high levels in New York today because of wind conditions during the morning hours. A shade tree, a symbol of life, was planted in Union Square. Ecology buttons, surgical face masks, and various protest signs were used by many demonstrators to get across their message. Earth Day celebrators heard several speakers appeal today for greater environmental controls, including Mayor John Lindsay.
What we really face is not air or water pollution, but the pollution of life itself. And this Earth Day testifies to the sudden, total realization that we must end this self-poison before it ends us.
This is the man who represents the 2nd Congressional District in Missouri, St. Louis County, James Wadsworth Symington. He is the 43-year-old son of Senator Stuart Symington. In 1970 terms, his thing is folk singing. He has performed in public for pay. Recently, he combined his performing talent with his interest in the environment to express how he feels about this land.
We have a great country. It takes a little time to get to know it, and that's why I wrote this song. It takes time to know a country, time to see the land, time to meet the people, and time to understand, time to know your neighbor on the other side, time to learn to labor in the vineyard of his pride. For this great road we're walking has many a pit and bend. Who can tell for certain just where the road will end? We know it's full of danger, so walk it hand in hand. It takes time to know a country and time to understand.
But is there time? The country that Symington knows best and represents is in the heartland of America, around St. Louis. And it is there that he went on this Earth Day to tell the young people that government is concerned about pollution.
This is St. Louis, gateway to the west. You can't miss it. Just look for the thick blanket of industrial haze and auto exhaust that covers over 2,500 square miles. More than 2 million people live here. One of them is James Symington.
I think we're in the St. Louis area, perhaps second only to Los Angeles in the problems we suffer under our air shed. People differ on the percent that is attributable to automobiles as distinct from industry, but let's face it, we've got a lot of both.
Symington spent the day speaking at local high schools and universities to young people whose most recent concerns have been the Vietnam War and the struggle for black equality and justice.
Social justice is not much consolation to people who can't breathe or drink the water. The average American commuter, the fellow that gets in his car and drives bumper to work, spends 13% of his working day breathing in the fumes of the automobile ahead of him. If Henry Ford had known that the internal combustion engine in 50 years' time would be suffocating his grandchildren, I'm sure he would have sought an alternative mode of propulsion. But we today do not have that lead time between the mistakes we make and the realization of them.
At Fontbonne College, one of Symington's 6 stops, an ecological mass was celebrated to dramatize God's creation of the natural environment and to ask forgiveness for man's despoiling of it. And at the University of St. Louis, students gave up their noon hour to a litter pickup march that produced more than 500 pounds of trash in a 10-block area. A mock factory was running at the University of Missouri at St. Louis, Symington's last stop, to show how industry discharges waste into the nearest body of water. And a butane-powered auto was on display
to prove that high-octane leaded gasoline can be replaced.
I wanted to visit briefly with you today to tell you that clearly environment is more than land, air, and water. It's attitude. And it begins at home. It begins in every single one of us. The person who is getting ready to challenge a major industry for its neglect is likely at the same time to be crumpling up a paper, tossing it on the ground, or a beer can out of his car window. I think we ought to recognize that while we look to government for reasonable laws and strong enforcement of them, that there's probably no area of American life, or any other life for that matter, in which the citizen, the private citizen, plays a more crucial role.
We've seen Earth Day in St. Louis, New York, Miami, Washington, Albuquerque, and Boston. By now, we must be aware that the problem affects us all, young and old, north, south, east, west, big city and small, New York and Ashtabula, Ohio, population 24,487. Chemicals from industrial plants along the banks drain into the river, where today dead trees rot. Ashtabula, the Indians called it River of Many Fish, has no fish that live today, and it carries its pollution into Lake Erie, which died long ago. Today in Ashtabula, the concern was for the living.
The young people here used this symbol of death to dramatize the dangers to life. They placed a childlike plastic doll in an antique casket. They said it represented the death of generations yet unborn. With a horse-drawn hearse, the pollution protesters turned to the past to plead for the future. This small-town movement was led by local teenagers. John Glavis, 19. His father's occupation, pest control. And Bonnie Campbell, also 19. She was born here. She remembers when the air was fresh and the water clean.
We want the people to project themselves into the casket, you might say. We want them to feel that they're responsible for putting that child in that casket. People have asked me, do you think you can stop the pollution problem without violence? I think you may see a great militancy growing, especially during the next 10 years with the youth.
You plan on getting married when you get older and having kids, and you want them to be able to take hikes in the woods, like be nature loving. You want nature to still be around, wildflowers and brooks and streams and everything. And if pollution keeps going on, there won't be the clear brooks. There might be a few, but you'd have to go far away to see them, and you want them right here where you're at.
If we pollute a little bit, people say, well, we'll tolerate it because it's for progress. Then a little bit more pollution, and a little bit more, and they keep tolerating it until it gets to the point where it's no longer tolerable. Here in Ashtabula, I believe that it's getting very near that point. Around in this area, you don't have to go very far before you find choking smog, and you can see streams that flow like ribbons of death underneath highways where the industries have poured materials into the water. This is what shocks me, is the fact that when something can be seen like this, that people don't do anything about it. They say, well, that's too bad, something has to be done, and that's where it stops.
The 4.5-mile procession ended at the Kent State University campus. The dedicated and the merely curious joined in an old song with a new meaning. These students admit that the conducting of a funeral service to point up the problems of pollution may be overstating the case. But they also point out that pollution, like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder. And it is also in the ear, nose, throat, and bloodstream. And that is why today the people of Ashtabula are mourning the deaths of children yet unborn.
We're all agreed, the far left and the far right and the vocal and silent middle, there is a serious and perhaps a deadly problem, but we do not all agree on who is to blame. Howard K. Smith in Washington has some thoughts on the identity of the villain. Howard?
Every vice is nothing but a virtue carried too far. The concern today about environment is all virtue, but nestled within it is a potential vice. That is the tendency to satisfy the need for scapegoats by seeking out some evil people who caused it all, like the allegedly greedy industrialists. Well, the truth certainly is that if blame is to be put on people, all of us share it with admirable democracy. The greatest event in the pollution of water was the invention of the flush toilet. Before that, waste went into holes in the ground. Now it gushes from every home out into the river or the lake. If guilt there must be, then each of us who uses that convenience is guilty. The greatest event in the pollution of the air was the invention of the internal combustion motor. 60% of air pollution must be attributed to us who buy cars, drive to work, and take innocent joyrides. Detergents probably come next, and the use of them is still an individual choice. You can choose to wash things in soap if you wish, but you don't. Detergents are easier, so out they go into the river, overfeeding algae till it rots amid stench and sinks to the bottom in fish-killing sludge. You and I did it. I suggest that the real villain is not evil people. It has been simple lack of awareness of the problem. If today means anything, it means the villain is dead or at least dying. People are aware. Let us forget scapegoats and get on to the technical and political work of doing something effective about it.
Last week at this time, as the Apollo 13 astronauts struggled back to Earth, a seldom used word became almost a conversational standby: consumables. We added up their oxygen and water supplies and measured the total against the number of hours left in the mission. And there was no doubt that unless they got back before their consumables vanished, so would they. Well, the ecologists tell us the spaceship Earth is in much the same fix, with not unlimited supplies of consumables and a cutoff point before splashdown and maybe fade out for all of us. The crisis may not be as dramatic as that of Apollo 13, and perhaps not as immediate, but the experts say it is no less real. A few weeks ago, I saw a boy of about 10 stand up in a public meeting and ask a speaker, "What's the solution to pollution?" The answer was, "You are." But of course it should have been, "We are," for all of us are polluters, and if we are the problem, we are also its solution. The cost will be high, but as the men of Apollo 13 will tell you, the Earth is worth it at any price. Some youngsters in Washington today expressed their feelings on this first Earth Day with new words to music we all know. We'll let their song be our good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News.